Are you looking to get ready, be prepared, and transform your financial future? Then you've come to the right place. This is the Get Ready Money podcast with Tony Stewart, where Tony has insightful conversations with financial experts who are changing the way we think about money. Catch up on the latest financial trends and hear practical advice from Tony and his expert guests so you can build healthy habits that work. Be empowered with tips for implementing small changes that can have a big impact on your financial future. So sit back and get ready to hear from today's guest.
Welcome to the Get Ready Money podcast, changing the way we think about money. I'm your host, Tony Stewart. I'm joined today by BatSheva Goldstein, the creator of financial date discussion cards, to explore how intentional conversations can strengthen our relationships, build trust, and bring more joy and clarity into how we manage our money together. BatSheva, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you here today.
Excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, this is awesome. So,
Mhm.
tell us a little bit about yourself. What is your origin story and how did it lead you to create the financial date discussion cards?
Well, I like to joke that I married into money, but it's not what everyone thinks. I married into a family full of money professionals. My husband is an investment advisor. His mother was a vice president at Morgan Stanley, and her mother was one of the first licensed stockbrokers, the first woman licensed stockbrokers in America. So there's this whole
Wow.
family of financial professionals. Um, so my husband and I have an investment company. Way back when it was the beginning, there was one day that his secretary called in sick, and Doug said, "Can you come into the office and answer phones?" So I'm a good team player. Came into the office, answered phones. I really liked what was going on, and over the years, I took over more responsibilities in the company. I became licensed as an investment advisor. And in sitting with clients to do financial planning, I realized there are some couples that have really great money conversations, and other couples' conversations don't quite hit it. And there's a lot of tension and distrust and negative energy. I thought to myself, what is it that makes a good financial conversation? Um, so realized that a lot of the conversations about money aren't about the dollars and the cents themselves, but it's all the subtext for it, the mismatched assumptions, the personal money stories that bring in, the fears, the hopes. And once a couple is aligned on what they want their money to do, then all the steps behind it, or all the next steps, the budgeting, the saving, the investing are just much easier because they're technical questions. So I developed this product, financial date discussion cards. Have you ever used discussion cards?
I haven't used them. Uh, I took a look at them and they're very cool.
Okay.
Just
So discussion cards are basically a prompt to help you answer a question, and you play them back and forth. There are different ways that you could answer them, but the cards ask questions which maybe some people are afraid to ask themselves or unsure of how to get to. So when the questions are asking the cards, it helps couples become aligned and understand where the other one's coming from, and it makes money conversations that much easier.
yeah, and I think that's so important because money is one of the leading causes of divorce. So it is an important thing, and there's oftentimes a money mismatch when people get married. So it's one of those things even that people
Mhm.
should talk about before they get
Right.
married. So,
Study after study shows that financial stress is the number one cause of divorce. So by eliminating or minimizing that, you strengthen the chance for a happily ever after.
yeah, and I think that's important because you don't want to be arguing about money, you want to be on the same page. I know one of the things
Right.
that's been hardest for us as a couple is while we're on the same page, it's like talking to our son about money is we're oftentimes not on the same page. So that becomes a whole nother dimension.
Right. Talking to children at different ages, there are different skills and different conversations that need to be had. Um, and it, and I think the conversations have to begin when the children are younger, um, because this way they grow up with something. And the best way to teach children to have good money conversations is to give them a model that so they see that you and your spouse are talking openly and calmly and rationally about money, and it's not something to be fought over.
Yeah, and I think that's important is, because kids do absorb when their parents fight. And I think, that that's a big thing. So, that leads into the next question is, why do you think money conversations can be so emotionally charged?
I think because there's this whole taboo, which I don't understand, about why you can't talk about money. And somehow by not being, you can't talk about it, but you're supposed to know how to use it. And that's a real disconnect. Um, and money so often is a sign for power or a way that people show their fears or love or security. And if you don't understand the subtext behind how someone uses their money, then it's impossible to move forward to use it together. So, my brother in law, he's from Wisconsin. I'm from New York. He always makes a joke that everyone in New York always tells you how much they pay for something. Whether they like what type of bargain they got, so they like to brag about that, or they like to brag about they paid full price because they could afford it. And it's so true because my mother, she never paid full price for anything. She was like the number one bargain hunter. And for her, like to pay full price was unthinkable. So sometimes today, it's just easier for me to not to shop around for the best deal because my time is worth money too, or whatever. And I just go and I spend what I want to spend. I hear her in my mind saying, this. And so we grow up with these emotional stories about how we're supposed to use money. And to change that is difficult because we have to rise above our past and to realize who we want to be and what changes we need to make to get there.
Yeah, I think that's important is that we have to recognize our own personal money stories and what we bring into it is that, we do all have, those money stories, how our parents talked about money, our early experiences with money. I know personally, I grew up in the life insurance field,
Mhm.
and a lot of people, I was a fee-based insurance consultant working mostly with other advisors, but the clients would oftentimes have a very negative view, and even financial planners would have a very negative view of life insurance because of people they had encountered or products that they had experience with. So it's like, you have to unwind all that and understand that before you can move on, because it's like this huge block.
Mhm.
So that's,
Yeah. So it reminds me of a story, not money related, but it parallels the money stories. So I have four adult children who are all married. I have one son-in-law who had a habit that drove me bonkers until I realized why he had the habit. So when he eats toast, he takes his toast and he puts it on the table. He doesn't use a plate. He doesn't use a napkin, just the toast and the crumbs directly on the table. Couldn't understand it. In my family, you always use the plate. If you don't have a
yeah,
plate, you use a napkin. But as a good mother-in-law, I didn't say anything. Then we spent a weekend with his parents, and I noticed the exact same thing. When his parents were eating toast, it was on the table, no plate, no napkin. So that's what he grew up with, and that's the lifestyle he thought was totally normal, and it fit into his worldview. And he may even have looked at my plate and said, oh, why is she getting an extra dish dirty? But we have to realize that people grow up with a certain view of eating toast or money, and to come beyond that is it requires thinking about things and talking about things differently.
Yeah, and that's my whole theme of the podcast, change the way you think about money, is because that's really it. And you have to understand where the other person is coming from, is because, like you said, it's not really about the toast. It's just how they did things. And it's just different. We may say that it's wrong, but they may say, well, then we're not getting plates dirty. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Personally, I think you need to use a plate, but that could be a whole nother discussion. You
So you're
know?
always invited to my house. I'm happy to wash your plate.
All right, deal. Um, so, one of the things that happens is couples don't have these conversations sometimes. So, what happens when couples avoid having money conversations?
That's a tough one because you think you're being kind in not bringing up a difficult topic, and just you'll take care of it yourself, or you'll make do. But when you push things underneath the carpet and avoid them, then eventually they're going to fester and just erupt like a volcano and be even worse. So avoiding the problem is not a good solution, especially about money, because it could cost you money. Like if you're avoiding paying your bills, you get the late fees, or if you're avoiding talking about investing, you miss the compound interest. But on the other side of the coin, from avoiding talking about money, there are also the couples who have the same conversation again and again and again without resolution. You're nodding. Yeah, I see that you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And that also isn't the best. It's like when you go to the gym, if you want to become stronger and you don't go to the gym, you're not gonna improve your muscles. And if you do go to the gym but don't do the reps the right way, it's not going to help you get stronger either. So you have to have the right type of conversation. And for couples who are stuck in that cycle of having the same arguments and again, tools like the financial date discussion cards could help reset that conversation, because it gives you permission to have a different type of conversation. It gives you permission to talk about money without looking at a spreadsheet, without looking at your budget or your credit card bill, but to take a step back. And the fact that you agree to have a conversation or agree to go to use the cards, you're giving permission to open yourselves up to have a better way of talking.
I love it. So, let's just go a little bit deeper on the cards. So how do they work? And how do people use them?
So simple. It's a deck of cards, 50 cards. They feel like playing cards from your youth, which is very intentional, because I think we all have happy memories of our children playing card games. Um, so each card has a question on it, which is an open-ended question. The questions address your past money stories. They address themes with your present life, and they also address themes in the future, so you could dream together. Because while we're talking about money, we also want to become better. We want to strengthen the bond between couples. And one of the strongest ways of doing that is to dream together. The questions try to reframe the tone of conversations from like, let's examine our budget, to let's dream and think about the future. I've had couples who've told me that she and her boyfriend were on a 13-hour trip cross country. So they took the box of cards and were flipping questions for a lot with their ride. You don't have to do the whole box at once. And in fact, I suggest just doing a few at a time to let the messages sink in, and the stories that you hear sink in. There's a CFP who told me that she and her husband were having a difficult money talk. And in the middle of the talk, she said, "Stop, hold on." And she ran to get the deck of discussion of financial date discussion cards. And she said, let's do a few questions. So so they went through a few questions just as a reset to remember and remind themselves that they're on the same team and they have the same goals. Um, so there are a lot of different ways to use them. Some you could go on a romantic date with your picnic blanket and your bottle of wine, or you could just keep them on the couch and a Sunday afternoon go through a few. The scene of a date, that's up to the couples. I'll provide the script with the questions.
You don't get into the matchmaking and the conversation and all that.
No, that's what the couples do best.
It's interesting to walk back to what you were saying about starting with dreams. Is I don't know if you're familiar with George Kinder and the life planning
Mhm.
concept. Oh, okay. Yeah. And how he
Yeah,
starts out with dreams and all that. So
yeah.
rather than getting into the tactics.
Because you can't live without money, but we have to realize that money is the tool to get us to what we want to do. So before we know what we have to decide what we want to do and the end goal of the money, our values, and then we can figure out how to get there.
Yeah, I love that. And I've heard that from so many guests. And, I completely agree is that money is a tool and these products and services are just the tools that help us accomplish a job. We don't have feelings about a screwdriver. We know what a screwdriver does and when we need it, but we don't go, "Ooh, I really don't like screwdrivers." Or maybe somebody does, but most people are pretty ambivalent about their screwdrivers. So,
That's a great point. I've also had people ask me, so why is it a physical product and why isn't it an app? And I think that goes back to the tool because you know as well as the next person that when you have an app on your phone, there are a gazillion other notifications and pings that come up, and it's hard to focus on the topic at hand. But if you put your phones away and just hold a card in your hand so it grounds you, um, gives you a little bit to fidget with if you're a little bit uncomfortable, but it serves as that physical tool.
yeah, I love that. So, one other question, this is probably one of the hardest ones is somebody doesn't want to talk about money. Or, both people don't want to talk about money, but usually there's one spouse who's a little bit more leery. How do they break the ice and, if they're nervous and they don't even want to use the cards and talk about money?
That's a very relevant question because often in a relationship, there's one person who wants to move forward, and the other one may feel comfortable where they are, or for some reason is resisting. I think that it's a matter of trust. And if you want to build your relationship, you do things that your spouse wants to do, even if you're not 100% sold. But eventually you'll be glad that you did it. I'm sure that no one wants to take out the garbage, but in order to make a household run smoothly, someone needs to take out the garbage. So we all have compromises, but I think that if you go into using the cards with an open mind and realize that they're not the cards are meant to take the place of your wife or your husband saying, "Why did you do that? Why did you do this?" They're not judgment questions. They're questions to to give you a chance to explain your philosophies. Um, and also, so many conversations with money happen even with just body language and not talking about money itself. So for someone who might be resistant to having a conversation about money, they're already having that conversation, but just with body language before they realize it.
That's interesting. And I think that is something in most couples. There's one partner who wants to talk about money and another who maybe less open to it. So it's good to be able to have that balance. So, we talked a little bit earlier about kids, and I know that it's, they're financial date discussion cards, but can they be used as a family?
Great question. And I've tried some of the cards at my adult children. One of the cards is what lesson or phrase have you consistently heard your parents teach you or say when you were growing up? So questions like that could be very interesting both for the child and for the parent. There there are questions in the deck which, depending on the age of the child, could be used. But I think more than sitting down with a child and using the discussion cards with them is the conversations that the parents have among themselves, talking about values or their goals. Then those conversations they could repackage to have with their children, of their younger children, or decide how to bring up those topics with adult children.
Well, I have a fantastic idea for an offshoot of the product because one of the biggest challenges in the financial planning world is aging parents talking to their adult children about their financial lives. And so I could see, even like you said, is maybe not all of the cards applying in that situation, but that they could be a good
Mhm.
icebreaker because that is a very uncomfortable conversation to have as an adult child is, like your parents aging. So we know that they're declining cognitively. I think it's inevitable that as we age, we decline, so it's good to have those conversations. Elderly people are more prone to fraud and scams. So it's like, I think, that would be an interesting application of the cards.
That's a great idea. I could see a couple who who may be reluctant to broach this topic with the aging parents to say, hey, look what we've been doing in our life. We've been talking about these questions. Is this something, is this a conversation that both elderly parents could have together? Or this is my answer. I'm curious to hear your take on this. And they could use that as a baby step to open up a broader conversation.
I love that because, that's something, I've covered in a couple podcast episodes is how to break, how you can break the ice to have these conversations because that's the toughest thing is so
It
many
is.
of us have grown up in families where you just do not
Mhm.
talk about money. You know, the
Okay,
parents do
so
their thing and,
great niche market idea. Come back next year and we'll talk about that product.
So
Recommended by
everybody
Tony.
watching and listening, look for a follow-up episode, maybe, or maybe not. But
Yeah.
this is an interesting use for the cards. And I think,
Yeah.
from what I've seen of the cards, I think a lot of them would work in that scenario, especially, with multiple adult kids
Mhm.
trying to talk to the
Absolutely.
parents.
One of the questions is about estate planning and like what legacies you want to leave, and should we leave a final donation to a charity in our wills, or like what do we do with what's left over after we no longer have to spend?
Yeah, and it's something I talk about with legacy planning is that if you don't communicate about this stuff, is the document only goes so far, but you actually have to talk and give some context to whoever your executor is, whether you're an aging parent, whether you're somebody in a couple, or whether, to your kids as they grow up, is like who you are, what your values are, so that they really get the spirit of your intent, not just, reading the will and trust and trying to say, oh, well, this doesn't really make sense. Is that context. So, to start to wrap up, I have what's called the Get Ready Hot Take Trio, and these are three quick questions to help our listeners change the way they think about money. These are questions I ask all my guests. The first one is, what money myth are you trying to break?
Good question. There are two myths I hear all the time, and I want to break them all. break them both. The first one is I'm not good with money. And money, it's not a test. It's not something that you're good with or not good at. It's not like a math test that you're going to fail. It's your habits and your understanding, and those all could be changed. And the second myth, which I think should be broken, is it's rude to talk about money. Everything has a time and a place and a context, and within a marriage and within a family is certainly the time and the place to talk about money, because because talking about money within a family, within a marriage, is talking about your future, and you have to talk about your future.
I love that. Talking about money in marriage is talking about your future. I want to run something by you. I did a podcast episode with a friend of mine, Bernadette Joy, where we talked about a new concept uh, called financial fluency rather than financial literacy. And it was sort of based on that same concept because with literacy, if you're not literate, you're illiterate. And that puts a lot of judgment and shame into the conversation. Whereas you say, fluency kind of matches up with that pass fail is like you just have to learn to speak the language and have the
I
conversation.
love I love the phrase fluency because when you're fluent, you could communicate better. And part of the financial communication gap that so many people have is they're just looking at the top and not the subtext, and not what drives their fluency or drives their decisions. So becoming fluent in understanding why you do what you're doing and why your spouse does what they're doing is critical for working together as a team.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, it harkens back to something you said earlier is that we don't learn about money anywhere. So, but that there's this expectation that we do know and we should know what to do, but that we have to give ourselves some grace and like, okay, well, we didn't learn this in school, so we need to learn it. And you can even learn it as a couple. So the next question is, we're going to get out the time machine for a minute. What advice would you go give your younger self going, no, let me rephrase it. What advice would you give your younger self knowing what you know now about money?
Younger me knew much less about money than today's me, and I hope that future me will know even more. Um, but I think what I would tell my younger self is don't chase a number as the finish line, because the goalpost always moves. There's lifestyle creep and all these things happen. And as life goes on, you have more responsibilities, the bills increase. So what number you thought would be safe and would make you feel good, it's you're not going to get security from hitting a number. You get security from clarity of knowing why, of knowing what's important to you and letting money serve that goal. I think I would tell myself that the only money you really have is the money that you've given away, because that's the money that's safe from inflation. It's safe from the markets going up and down. It's safe from credit card bills. It's the money that you give away to charity or to other donations is the money that carries your values forwards. And that's the money that you really have.
That's interesting. And I think that's important because for a lot of people, that is their values, but they don't really think about their giving strategy. So for people watching, listen to the podcast, I have had episodes where we've talked a lot
Mhm.
about giving, both as part of your legacy, but also how to give while you're alive, because it's an important part for many of us. We want to support organizations that match our values. So the final question is, what is your number one tip for changing the way we think about money?
That's an easy one. Is everyone should get financial date discussion cards. Um, because they'll help you align your spending and saving with your values. But seriously, to switch the focus, to switch the focus of your conversations from the dollars to the why behind the dollars. Because so often money arguments are about the colliding values. Switching for like asking, you have to switch from asking how much does this cost to why is this important for you, and how can we balance what matters to both of us. So I think the cards help uncover the subtext in conversations, and that's where the breakthroughs and having easier money talks happen.
Definitely. And, I mean, the cards are a great tool to kick off the conversations because we need to talk
Mhm.
about money, both as a family, but also with the outside world is, money comes up all the
Yeah.
time in all kinds of situations. It's intertwined with every single part of our life.
And your podcast is great in helping people think about money differently. So,
Thanks. It's great because
mhm.
I have guests like you who bring great perspectives. So, speaking of which, where can people learn more about you and pick up the financial date discussion cards?
Great. Well, you could follow me on LinkedIn, BatSheva Goldstein, or you could go to the website, financialdate.com, and there's a buy button. You could click on the and buy the cards. For listeners of today's episode, if you send me an email at BatSheva, BATSHEVA at financial date, um, then I will be happy to give you a coupon code for the deck. But Sheva at financialdate.com.
That's great. Well, thank you for offering the discount code. And for everybody watching and listening, as always, there will be links to Batsheva's
Mhm.
LinkedIn profile, to her website, and I'll share her email address on the website so you can contact her.
Great.
Ask for a discount code, or can they contact you on a contact us form on your website? Do you have a
There is a contact us form there if that's easier, and if you just let me know that you heard me on Tony's podcast, then I will pass along the discount code to you.
That's great. So thank you very much for coming on the
Great.
podcast today, Batsheva, and for sharing your time and your insights.
Thank you for having me, and let's hope everyone has easier money conversations moving forwards.
That is awesome. And thank you, everyone, as always, for tuning into this episode of the Get Ready Money podcast. If you learned something today to spark a new idea or help you have a conversation with your partner, please be sure to subscribe and to share this with a friend. You can also join the Get Ready movement at tonystewart.com and access all of my financial literacy resources. Until next time, let's change the way we think about money.